Today we have a special guest, Regan Caruthers. She is a writer, spiritual teacher, and founder of the Asset Yoga Center, exploring themes of inner transformation, healing, and how to embody the energy of divine love. Her recently published memoir, Tragic Magic, is a testament to the power of unconditional love, forgiveness, and the discipline required to live life from an unconditionally loving heart. So I'm really excited to have you on the show today, Regan.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Do you mind telling us, I know it's a hard question to answer, but just a little bit about your story?
I would begin by just sharing I'm a seeker. I was born into some pretty complex conditions. My mother, while she could radiate the greatest love I've ever known, other than the love of God, she really suffered and she couldn't self-regulate very well. And she was clairvoyant and her young life was pretty miraculous. And yet, as time went on, her days were full of contrast. And so she provided that to me. One of the good decisions she made at the age of 3, I attended a school where we meditated every day and did Tai Chi for gym and photographed our energy field with Carillion film and sang songs about the power of conscious thought and divine love. I had some pretty remarkable tools at my disposal because of my education, and yet it was inadequate. I shut my gifts, similar to my mother, off at the age of 9. I literally commanded out loud for it all to stop because it was just too much. And it did. And it wasn't until 27 when I experienced a dramatic spiritual awakening that the wisdom teachings of my youth came back. And that awakening experience changed my life and my path. I found myself working at the Heart Math Institute a couple of years after that, leading retreats and programs for business audiences. But it probably wasn't until my mid-40s, and I'm almost 60, where I really felt that I was healed from what I had been dealt and what I created myself, right, as a consequence of those unhealed parts of me. And that's why I wrote the book, to share my journey and to inspire readers to do the work. It's not easy. It's not quick. If there's a spiritual teacher that says, do these 5 things and this will happen, run. It's just not like that. It's a process. Everybody's process is different, but I feel like I've created some processes for myself that have worked. And now I'm just committed to sharing what I know with other people.
That's beautiful. I love having people on that have different paths on how they find healing. Mine was through EMDR, or that was at least part of it, through therapy, and big believer in therapy myself personally. But I recognize how there are so many different ways to have that healing, to find healing. And I would love to hear if you're okay with sharing a little bit about Tragic Magic and what that path looked like for you a little bit. Like, was that through yoga because you have a yoga studio? What was that like?
Yeah, I wish I could tell you precisely how and why, but what I can say, because there's so much to it, but what I can say is that learning how to access divine love, the energy of God, for lack of a better word, and I know God is a triggering word for a lot of people and makes perfect sense, and that's the word I use. Anyway, bringing that in to all the traumatized parts of myself, right? Doing the unpacking, looking at developmental stages, right? Age, birth to 3, 3 to 6, and so on, and really getting honest about what I had known and what was imprinted on me in terms of belief, either about myself or the larger world. And so what I have learned to do is to bring that energy of love into those traumatized aspects of myself, not to change their mind, but just to love them. So that's one piece. And I detail that in the book. But I think part of it had to do with just who I am and my soul history. Part of it had to do with this remarkable mother that I had, my education, whatever. But I just know what the sound of divine guidance is. And I've never been led astray by that guidance. And so I don't want to have any spoilers for the end of my book. But what I will say is that divine guidance literally saved my life. what I try to help people do is create the inner conditions to know what that sounds like and feels, and to have the courage to follow.
I'm so glad that you mentioned the God aspect because in therapy, for example, people are really gun shy to talk about God, but that has been one of the most pivotal things for people when they are finding healing. And we're so afraid as a culture to introduce that aspect or talk more about it when it can bring so much healing. So I'm glad that you went there. People call it different things, higher power, whatever. But I love how you talked about getting honest and the sound of divine guidance. Like we live in such a busy, cluttered world that it's really hard to be in tune to that and to hear that. So for those of us that maybe are feeling a little stuck in that way, do you have any guidance on how we might start to tune into that and hear that and recognize that sound of divine guidance?
My first question would be, what are you practicing? Meaning that if you're not sitting in the quiet with your eyes closed, praying to that higher power for help and learning how to create inner quiet, right? It would be like trying to have an important conversation in a really noisy room. We all know how that goes. Doesn't go very well, right? So the first task, if you will, is to learn how to create quiet. The divine and your guides and your angels and this higher power is always guiding you, right? It's always there. The difference is your presence. A lot of teachers don't really talk about this because it's not a very popular thing to say, but discipline matters. If you want to have that big revelation, okay, what are you doing? What are you eating? And I don't mean just your diet, though that's important, what you're allowing into your consciousness, right? There's so much fear. Fear is the program. It's on your phone, it's on the television. Yeah. So you got to learn how to get still and you need to learn how to access love. And it can start very simply if you don't know what love of God feels like. And a lot of people don't, and that's okay. Maybe you know what the love of your newborn child feels like, or your pet, or a time in nature that felt so awe-inspiring. Any elevated emotion, start there. Learn how to self-generate that in a quiet place. All of that helps to create the inner conditions to hear divine guidance. And if you have a more coherent physiology through your spiritual practice, you probably will have more courage to heed what it says.
Yeah, absolutely. So many beautiful nuggets that you talked about there. Just how discipline does matter and revelation. Like, what are you doing to get that revelation? Learning to get still and accessing that love. Just such beautiful reminders. Recently, I've talked about this on the show before, but I had both my brother and my father pass away separately at younger ages and pretty tragically. And so I've always been fascinated by death, as weird as that sounds. But so I watch a
No,
lot of
it's
near,
important.
yeah, I watch a lot of near death experiences, and there's some YouTube. I was trying to remember his name. I can't remember his name, but YouTube videos that were really well done, and just that message in all of them was that same thing. Like once they had these experiences, they realized that they were missing the point, and it's all about love. It's all about getting still. Exactly what you're talking about. The other stuff just fell away. It did not matter as much. So I'm trying to remember those things without having that experience even necessarily. But I love that you're speaking to that. And so in your 40s, you said you found full healing. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's when I became truly disciplined. Here I had this exceptional education, this dramatic awakening in my late 20s, worked at Heart Math, did remarkable things, and it didn't matter.
Yeah.
It didn't matter. Yeah, all of those things informed me. They provided me tools. They provided me like a new energetic baseline to refer to and to self generate. But in the absence of a disciplined practice, my life was still a bit of a roller coaster, which is what I share in the memoir. So by my mid 40s, some life circumstances had changed. I had a really nurturing partner for the first time in my life. And I just got disciplined. So every day, pray, meditate, walk in nature, practice yoga. Yeah, all of it matters. And while I've eaten an organic diet, that's funny because after my awakening in my 20s, that was 94. One of the things God directed was an organic diet. In 1994 in St. Louis, Missouri, that was a pretty big ask. But anyway, it matters what you put in. It matters what you put in. And yeah, so just increasingly getting disciplined about all of it and then being able to create a more peaceful life. Doesn't mean things aren't hard, right? I'm human. This is a complicated planet with a complicated collective and a lot that makes really being in a stable, coherent, love filled heart challenging, right? It's no joke. And so, in the absence of practice, I would say it's probably impossible. So, that's what I want your viewers or your listeners to understand is you got to do the work and you got to keep showing up. And discipline isn't motivation. Discipline is motivation is like, I'm motivated. Discipline is you do it when you don't want to.
Which is definitely hard, as we all know. But one question I have for you too is I found over the years in my work and otherwise that sometimes we close down, we shut down our hearts, we're not as open to understanding and learning when people use different vocabulary or we put them in this box of, oh, they're a yogi, they're into energy work, they're into something that might be potentially different than what our environment is. But I find like when we switch words, sometimes we can understand and be a little bit more open. So tell me a little bit about energy work. Tell me about what that looks like to somebody that might not understand.
Okay. I would first ask them, have you ever felt love for someone or something? Hopefully the answer is yes. But if the answer is no, because that could be true, have you ever felt grateful for someone or something?
Yeah.
Start there. It's just about if you understand, and this is science, not anything other, every time your heart beats, you generate an electromagnetic wave of energy in a giant torus shape. It's just a physiological fact. And the quality of that energy is predicated on what you're thinking and feeling. And so anger, for example, right, even if it's righteous anger, doesn't matter, has the same biochemical consequence, right? Has the same cognitive consequence. We can't access the higher reasoning centers of the brain in certain emotional states. And yet in those moments, what we're needing is to problem solve. So we need our prefrontal cortex, right? So what I would say is just start feeling love and gratitude more often. Begin there and learn how to close your eyes, sit up with a tall spine, and notice what's going on in there. You sit for 5 or 10 minutes, you're going to get pretty acquainted with what those thought loops are.
Yeah.
And by the way, all of that is your practice. You've practiced those things about changing the practice.
Just feel more love and gratitude. And it goes back to that stillness again, being more present, simple ways like how that can change our environment completely. So, what if, for example, a listener or viewer is stuck in frustration or resentment for, say, maybe a partner, or just generally liking their life, but just feeling like they're just noticing all the shadows? What do they do?
Well, you have to bring light and love to it.
So, does it go back to those same things?
It does. Yeah, it absolutely does. And when we're emotionally triggered, as much as we think it's about that other person or the situation, it's my absolute understanding and belief that no, it's actually a call from your unhealed self because someone else could be experiencing the same thing and have a completely different reaction and response. So there's nothing innate in the thing. It has everything to do with you. Right? So that's why that unpacking of developmental stages, what you experienced, really getting honest about the trauma, getting honest about the beliefs that are running. Yeah, you need to bring love to those parts of you, not to change their mind, right? My mother was mentally ill. I was making my own sandwich at 15 months. So that toddler, that inner toddler, doesn't trust anybody. She's not wrong, right? But what she does need is to be held in loving witness. And for me to give her that inner parenting, that quality of love that she needed then and didn't get. And when you begin to do that tending, right, and bring that love into yourself, there's physiological reasons why you're less triggered, right? Because of the amygdala, right? The amygdala part of your brain, which is this repository of your emotional memories. And it's constantly surveying the environment, looking for matches between what you're experiencing and what is stored. And it's very imprecise. So a simple example would be there's a new guy at work that looks just like a bully you knew in high school, and you hate that guy. He's absolutely a sweetheart, but you can't see it because your amygdala is warning you, right? So the more you reflect on moments in time when you felt love and gratitude, that goes in the amygdala. That begins to change the ratio of what's in there. Ultimately, if you do it long enough, like me, then you don't become triggered because there's not a triggering mechanism really within your brain anymore. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah. I love learning about this stuff and talking about it. Just being able to stay grounded because you've done enough of that deep work. You've really, again, using slightly different terms here, but you were able to, if I understand right, have greater compassion for your experience, validate that experience of that young child, that 15-month-old that had to do these things and beyond, and work through some of those things, change those neural pathways so that now when things happen that remind you of that, you are able to stay more grounded. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah. There's not this primitive part of my brain triggering a fight or flight response. Doesn't mean that the thing that I'm experiencing suddenly becomes easy. It's not what I'm saying. But I have more capacity, right? I have more neutrality. I have more inner poise. I have more access to the thing that makes us uniquely human.
You said, I love how you said it has everything to do with you. And that goes into that ownership model, not staying a victim, not staying stuck and pointing fingers, because we've all had something happen to us. And I find myself slipping into that victim cycle, but remembering, okay, like, what am I learning from this? What can this teach me? And moving back into that space of ownership, of healing, of love, of compassion, validation. But it's not easy to do. Like, I've done a lot of therapy, I've done my own deep work on many different levels. And I find just sometimes it just comes out of the blue. I don't know if you have any guidance when it comes to that, where something can be so triggering that you thought you worked through, and then it just rears its head. Do you have that happen to you? And do you have any insights on what to do when that happens?
Yeah. Think of growth as a spiral, it's not linear. So we tend to come back to the same stuff.
Right.
Ideally, we come back to that stuff and we have more capacity. Maybe we have a new tool, a new insight. I did a video on Instagram about this recently where I was super triggered about something going on in the collective. Doesn't matter what it is, but I was pissed. I was really outraged, righteous outrage about X. And I know what that means. That means, okay, Regan, sit down, close your eyes, access a feeling of love, and ask yourself, what is this? What am I truly responding to? And what I came up with in this particular moment was deeper level of forgiveness needed for my parents. So what was being triggered in me was a feeling of powerlessness. That's why I was so enraged about it, because I felt powerless to do anything to make it different. That is not an unfamiliar feeling. So again, that the situation in the collective hasn't changed, but by me going in, asking for higher wisdom around, okay, what is this? Understanding what it truly was, right? Tending to that. And then, yeah, the situation is as it is, but I feel different about it.
I want to break that down a little bit because I'm just thinking about a recent example. My husband and I had I don't even know if you call it a disagreement, but something where I felt very triggered. I had done everything I could to create the perfect environment so we could work together in the yard without it being terrible, because that's often how it ends. and and then at the very end, he said, "I'm not going to help you," and I was just so activated, just so frustrated because I really needed his help. And I was surprised by how triggered I was. And you talked about this, I'm going to go through that again. So slow down, access that love. And the word I often use with my clients is get curious, that
Mhm.
curiosity. And then maybe it's forgiveness, maybe it's something else, but tending to it. So in this case, if I would have slowed down, if I would have accessed that love and got curious and done that, I could have been to that place more. Instead, I like fed that fire, that righteous indignation. I'm right. Like, how dare he? Because that's, but how you can get to that, because you eventually do if your heart's open, but I fed it way too long. So getting to that space and then also having compassion for yourself in that process, maybe not handling it as well. But did I
Absolutely.
miss anything? Because I think that's so well said, breaking that down.
Yeah, just knowing which little girl is responding.
And when you
So
said that powerlessness, that's exactly what it was. Like remembering the stepdad that never helped, that I never had power, I never had control. Yeah, getting curious. And it sounds
right.
like your book is very much about that. They can read that and find out all those tidbits and
Well, it's not that much of a how-to. It's more, my story. There's how-to, like how I chose to ultimately transcend this stuff. Yeah, there's some of that, but that's probably going to need to be either an online course or another book.
we also learn through stories, right? We can't just
Yeah.
apply it. Yeah.
Yeah. What people have said is that it inspires them, it gets them motivated to look at stuff and to know through what I've shared that divine guidance is a real thing. And if you can create the inner conditions to hear it and know it, it can truly do miracles. What I can say is that I faced death 3 years ago, even though it's in the book. I'll share it because it's still worth reading, even if I tell folks this. So I was in Joshua Tree in the high desert in California. I was living in south of Santa Cruz, and I went to Joshua Tree to write. We were still locked down in California. It was downright dystopian, and I just needed to get away. And so when I went to write, I would always have a ritual and prayer and meditation. And I'm in the middle of nowhere. And in meditation, I'm told, you need to urgently move home. No fear in the message, quite matter of fact, very clear, succinct, no more detail. And I knew the truth of it. So I literally came out of meditation, checked my phone to see if I had enough bars because I was literally in the mood, and called a friend in St. Louis. That was where I was raised, and said, God says I have to urgently move home. She was a realtor. I'm like, will you help me find where God wants me to be? She said, of course. And I flew out of Palm Springs the following morning. Everybody back in California thought I was cuckoo as Cocoa Puffs. Anyway, New St. Louis wasn't where I was supposed to be. Told in meditation, Franklin County. I don't even know what that means. Tell my realtor, find where I am now. We sell the beach house. I live right on Monterey Bay in one of the most beautiful places in the whole world. And I'm moving to rural Missouri, right? Imagine. Get here. I start teaching yoga as an act of service on my back lawn. I'm redesigning a big garage for my yoga center. I'm clear about what God wants me to do. I think that's why He's brought me back to the St. Louis region. And then in meditation, I'm told, you need to urgently go to a doctor. I'm like, okay. One of the advantages of being in the country is you can see a doctor right away. So I saw a doctor the next day. And what do doctors do? They listen to your heart. And he listened to my heart and he said, Regan, you have a really loud murmur. Something's wrong. We need to get you scheduled for an echocardiogram as quickly as possible. So that was the following day. And then the day after that, I learned I was dying, that I had a congenital heart defect and that my aortic valve, because of the defect, had become highly calcified. And the only solution was open heart surgery. Barnes Hospital, where I was born in St. Louis, just happened to be one of the best places in the entire world for the surgery I needed. So I got the call in December of 21 to move home. I was here in March. June, I'm told I'm dying. July, I had open heart surgery. And that was to replace my aortic valve. And on my day of discharge, which just 4 days after my surgery, which was pretty remarkable, my surgeon came to see me and he said, Regan, there's no clinical explanation of how you were alive prior to this. It was the worst aortic valve he'd ever seen in over 40 years. Typically, in your aortic valve, you got about a $50 for blood to flow through the valve. In my case, it was less than the diameter of a Q-tip stick. And I said, do you believe in Jesus Christ? When he said there was no explanation, he said, I do. I said, that's the only explanation I have. I believe Jesus was a teacher of love. And so he has always been my teacher. Okay. Fast forward, I almost die of complications post surgery. But I'm like, if I was supposed to be dead before, I don't think I'm going to die of this. That just didn't make any sense. So I was hopeful. Took 6 months. And then a dear friend who was a Christian mystic died unexpectedly to Florida in April. So the July was the surgery. December, I was finally healed from severe heart inflammation. And now it's April and I'm in Florida at this funeral. And it's Palm Sunday. I'm such a Christian, I had to look up on Google, what is Palm Sunday? Anyway, I'm like, oh, this is an important day. I go to this funeral. I'm so sad. He was such a dear friend. And then I come to my room because I just want to go to the beach and decompress, grieve in the sunshine. And I don't have clothes on because I'm about to put my bathing suit on. And I'm like, I'm looking in the mirror. I'm like, my scar looks different. And I get closer to the mirror and sure enough, I don't know when it happened. If it happened that day, have no idea. I have a cross on my chest. So when I showed that to my surgeon, he wept and he said, Regan, that's another miracle because there's no horizontal cutting. It's a vertical cut.
Thank you for sharing that story. That's incredible. I love hearing in all walks of life people's stories of miracles, of healing, of growth, and how you were so tuned into that divine guidance that you could hear those things and be in the right space, right place at the right time. And because of that, have those miracles take place. Just so beautiful. I'm grateful that you're willing to share that because I think that happens so much more, but we're hesitant to sometimes share those stories and we don't hear and grow together and the telling of those things. So just think about all of us that are stuck in that feeling like maybe our life is a roller coaster, like you talked about, feeling like maybe we don't really need discipline or maybe it's too hard to get that revelation. But just with your message, just remembering that we can slow down, we can practice these things, that prayer, that meditation, that silence enough to get reacquainted with that divine guidance, that voice with God, with Jesus Christ. And it just takes starting, beginning those tiny steps. I'm so grateful that you came and spoke to this. Is there any final words that you'd like to leave with us, Regan?
Yeah, nothing changes until you do.
I love that.
Yeah. Maybe people go on Amazon and Barnes and Noble and buy my book, Tragic Magic. That would be amazing. They can follow me on Instagram. I do try to do 4 or 5 videos a week just on different things that are coming through. So that is easy and free. And I don't know. I just want whoever is listening, take better care of yourself.
I think we can all do a little bit more to take care of ourselves for sure.
And I do have a website, regancaruthers.com too. There's some other content there that might be supportive for people. Yeah.
That's what I was just about to say, that I'll put all of your links in the show notes so people can find you there, and we'll put her on socials as we air. And yeah, so they can check out your things there.
Let me mention too, because I don't know, this might be something you're interested in. I feel your earnestness, but I do what I call inner life coaching. I don't do it for many people. I'm pretty selective about it, but that's a really intimate way of me sharing these tools, supporting you, being your accountability partner in it. It's a pretty transformative process. that I love doing. I just don't want to do it all day. So there's information about that on my website too.
Perfect. I'll definitely put that there so we can all see that, and I'll check it out myself. So thank you again.
Thank you for having me. Be well.